Hi guys, welcome back. We're over here at For the Win, and because we have a few of our Dungeons and Dragons team members sick, we have decided to do an interview with our wonderful DM Alex here. You guys have seen him play Bahatman as well as crush our spirits in many different Fey realms, and sometimes we almost think he will crush our characters completely in many different battle scenarios that he's put us through. But luckily most of us have survived. And he's here to answer any questions you might have, as well as just to talk about some of the adventures we've had where we've been challenged in numerous different scenarios on how we react and how we interact with NPCs. So, Alex, how's it going?
Hey, good. Can you believe we're at month 7 of doing this?
I know, it's quite surprising. We started back in May, and we've, even with a few hiccups, we've still gone pretty strong, and it's really impressive to see where we're at now.
Well, 5 months of the stream, but we've actually been playing D&D for 2 months before we started streaming. So
that is true.
7 months.
That is true. 7 months in total. It's pretty crazy to think about that. But it's been great, and I enjoy it, and I look forward to it. Even on my really tired days, I'm always excited to come in here and hang out with you guys, Yosara, Egg, and yourself, Alex, and just kind of lose myself from the real world and go into the Ferelden world and the Feywild. So
that's the nice thing about mountain time is I'm a couple hours ahead, so it's only 6 o'clock for me, so I'm wide awake.
Right. And all of our friends on the East Coast are like, it's 8:30ish. We're getting there. It's getting later. I'm over here in Central Time. It's like, it's 7. Just finished dinner. Let's hop on the computer and play some Dungeons and Dragons. Our other friends are
I'll be
in
East Coast next
Boston.
week. I'll be in Knoxville, Tennessee for work. But yeah, I still plan on streaming. I should be off by 8 o'clock, which is stream time. So we should be good to go.
Yep. We'll make sure everything's set up and ready. And we'll be getting back into the Land of Char when we come back, right?
Yes.
After our brilliant museum heist where we stole a sword.
Which I gotta say, I've done probably 3-4 heist scenarios now in my D&D career, and I enjoyed that one the best.
Okay.
I ran one, my first heist scenario, I had one of the guys on the actual team that was going to heist it help me set up all the traps and all of that, so he knew where everything was, and we used that as like recon. This way it was kind of fair. The problem was he was partially sick the day of the actual heist and just phoned it in. So they just said, hey, let's just bust in the front door. And I didn't pull any punches, and it led to a 4 out of 5 person TPK, I think.
4 out of 5 TPK?
4 out of 5. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I wasn't pulling any punches, and you walk in the front door of a heist, and yeah, they were not properly armed. They didn't have their spells buffed.
They weren't ready to go like Yosara was last session with her Eldritch Blast, ready to take down anybody and everybody that came through the door.
I told other people about the sheer brutality of what you guys were doing, and they thought it was pretty extreme, yet pretty funny. So normally I don't try to reward just sheer, utter brutality, but because you guys went so far with it, I mean, what else was there to do? And I had written a script for the museum involving a set number of guards, a set number of police, an escalation level for the SWAT team, and then I had 2 levels above that where you were going to fight basically the crew from Archer, one of my favorite shows, and then there was one final screw you up level boss, but didn't get that far. So
we got out of there before we got that far. I will say your rendition of GTO and the Grand Theft Auto star levels you kept giving us randomly throughout the session was very encouraging and entertaining.
It might have been a little bit meta, but I thought it kind of worked, and it was objectively funny. I did have 5 levels of escalation, the final one being, well, it'll be a mystery, but let's just say that
he'll use it later. I know by him saying it's a mystery, we'll end up fighting that some way or another later on in another session. But that's okay.
Recycle all the resources.
Exactly.
I'm an environmentalist at heart. What can I say?
But no, it was really great, and the map layout was awesome. I did feel bad having had to step away myself for a minute, and then coming back, and Yosara had nat 1'd my character while I was away. I was like coming back. I was like, oh, all right, time to move.
You played it straight, and if anyone wants to know a really great way to build a map, literally Google museum map, and then overlay that on top of, I use Dungeon Painter, and then I just overlaid that on top of Dungeon Painter, traced it with some walls, and then just built the map on top of it. So it was literally built off the map of the actual museum, or an actual museum in California, which is the La Brea Tar Pits Museum, I think.
Okay, awesome. So do you use Dungeon Painter for a lot of your maps when you create that for us?
All of them, yeah.
All of
So
them?
I use Dungeon Painter. I used to use the free version, but after spending so many hours doing it, I ended up paying for it. And then it was like $15 one-time payment. One of the best investments I've ever made. And then on top of that, you can download other map packs to give you different icons and things like that. And so everything's made with Dungeon Painter. And I would say the average map probably takes 2-3 hours to make.
Okay.
And as I have a 2-year-old, if I've just put her to bed and she's still a little bit squiggly, I'll sit down and make some maps for a little while. And when she finally goes down, or if I have to get up in the middle of the night and can't sleep, I just sit down and make a little bit of maps. And it's cathartic. It's a little bit relaxing. And I wouldn't say I'm great at it, but I think the maps are fun and you guys really bring them to life.
No, I definitely enjoy them, especially the layers. If you guys have been with us in the past, we've had different types of versions of maps where we'll be completely blind, or we'll be walking in a circle and then realize, oh, hey, we need to jump into a giant, basically hole of something and try and survive and get down to the next level of the map, which is always fun.
Well, once again, that was in Solace's Sanctuary, and the whole concept of that bad guy is you're in his world, and he was the spider, and how do you get through a spider web? You don't go through the actual web itself, you got to go through the holes, and I think it was Yusara who figured it out, is he never really was lying about anything he said, but he was definitely guiding you down a path, and it was only when you stopped playing his game that you were able to win.
That's very true, and that worked out well. Honestly, though, my character did freak out a little bit and was about to like rip a new one into a couple of people, but by the end of it, we were able to get into his chamber, which was really big and nice, and that map was very richly decorated, and we appreciate that. It helps bring the role playing to life, I feel like, when we have a map that's, you know, easy to interact with and able to really bring the story playing to life.
I appreciate that, and I think that's a lot of fun, is having a map that actually tells a story. My first campaign, when I was first learning to DM, I built a map on Dungeon Painter, the free version, going back a couple of years, and I didn't really know what I was doing running my own homebrew. I'd run part of a module before, and so when I ran my first homebrew, I basically created this map, and the map actually told the story. As a DM, I really subscribe to the theory, I guess, that a DM's job is to build the world. The characters bring that world to life. So I create the rules, I create the concepts, I create the characters, but your interactions bring it to life. And creating a map that had secret passages and trapdoors and good and bad guys and lairs and things, it really brought that first campaign to life. And if any of my original players saw that map, they would know exactly what it was, because they had a story for every single room in that entire place. Our playstyle is a little bit different now, and I like the playstyle better. Okay. But beginning as a DM, having a map that told a story actually made the world building a lot easier, and it gave you a centerpiece for that world building.
Awesome. So in your experience, you know, you've obviously used a lot of digital world building. What do you think of that versus the true original tabletop world building, and how that's almost become digital in itself, with people basically laying out a touch screen, digital screen where they play on that, versus what we do here in our stream where we're using our mouse and our keyboards and our computers to interact with the maps you've created for us?
So I've kind of played it all. My first DM, he was very theater of the mind. We had no maps at all. But I love combat tactics. I love it. It's fun for me. One of my favorite games of all times was XCOM. So what that means is, by creating a map, it allows for much more dynamic combat. It allows for flanking and distances and all of these things, friendly fire, to become much more effective. I like it better. And it's not that hard to create a simple battle map just for a battle that is now that brings tactics to life. After my first DM, my second DM would just throw down a piece of grid paper, and he had like little trees and all that, would put them on parts of the grid. So you had some level of terrain to play around. Fantasy Grounds allows us to take that to, a couple of levels beyond that, where now we have doors, we have walls, we can do 3/4 cover, we can do all of this stuff. And someone with a little bit of a background in coding, which I have, I can code a lot of that stuff in, and it makes it just easier and more fun to interact with. Because now we don't have to constantly add the onesies and twosies on the dice. Mm-hmm. And instead, it just does all the math for us. And I think it adds to the gameplay because it makes things more streamlined. And I genuinely believe our combat is faster and a lot more dynamic than the combat I originally was playing with as a player.
No, I don't disagree. I definitely think, my limited experience, as I don't have a lot of experience, chat, it's been really fun because we move through the combat efficiently without feeling like we're bogged down. Especially, as players, since there's a lot of us when we're all together, when we're all here, then we can still get through the map and get a good ways forward into it. I think that prime example would be, the Siege on the Wall.
Yeah, well, the Siege on the Wall was a little different. For those of you who weren't there, I, being the sadistic DM I had every person create 6 NPCs, 5 NPCs.
I think it was 6 because we ended up having 2 other non-created NPCs with us when we were charging the wall. So yeah, 6 sounds right.
So it's 5 or 6 NPCs, and we'll call it 6. And I think I had a rule was 1 had to be a girl, 1 had to be over a certain age, and then the rest were between the ages of, I think, 18 and 50. Mm-hmm. They had to have a motivation for joining the army. They had to have a quirk. They had to have a unique personality trait, a reason to like them, something like that. And out of these NPCs, they became the ladder teams of the people, of the characters who were charging down a wall to siege a wall. So as they were taking fire from arrows and ballistas, it was their NPCs that they created that in their heads, the players had some sort of a small emotional connection with that were taking the hits. And we spent, I want to say, a full session bringing these NPCs to life, where some people liked some of the NPCs they created, and then I got you to hate some of the NPCs that you yourself had created.
Yep. I think it was at least, there's one full session where we were preparing, and we really got to dig into each of our NPCs just a little bit. It wasn't like we went like all the way in. And then after that, it was kind of handling the aftermath, and then it continued on for a good bit of the story where we were still interacting with them. And I think we've even seen it as we transition into the Feywild, some interactions you've brought back to us, especially when we were in the astral plane, which was really enjoyable seeing.
Yes, which this is definitely something, if I ever start another Dungeons and Dragons group, the first thing I'm going to do is have the players create a small group of NPCs, really flesh them out, bring them to life for a little while, and then these NPCs become a part of the story, and because they're created by the players, there's more of an emotional connection. And Alaric even became your squire. Right. You had the one guy whose name escapes me right now, who was the artist, and a few other ones that had their own smaller stories.
Xavier,
yeah. Xavier the artist, and little bits and pieces.
What was his name? It was Yosaris. Like, he had the little seal.
Anyways, Aldrin, I think.
No. It was the other one, Pup Cup or Pup. That was the name of
the seal was Pupcake.
Yeah, Pupcake was the name of the seal. I always remembered him by the seal name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was fun.
Yeah, and bringing them to life was fun. It wasn't a lot of homework for you guys, but it was just enough where you had an emotional connection. Yeah, it was Aldrin, who loves a seal. He had a sick sister. And giving that motivation and emotional connection to NPCs motivated your teams, I think, enough when you were charging that wall. And it changed the behavior. And it made it tragic when Kale's team was completely obliterated. Yep. And I think each one of you took at least one loss, but it brought that loss to life. No, you didn't. That's right.
my team was blessed because they had me leading them, that all of us made it on top of the wall, except for I think my two in the back. But if you do recall, and you guys can watch this little video, there's a clip on our channel that's Yahtzee clip, and that was where we were charging the wall, and I got very lucky to have rolled 8 3 times, and so my 8th ladderman ended up getting speared and skewered 3 times.
So the way the mathematics worked on this is you had 8 laddermen, and if a hit was assigned to your ladder team, a D8 was rolled. Number 1 hit slot number 1, number 8 hit slot number 8. Mm-hmm. She took 3 hits all at once, and when rolling 3 dice, she rolled 8 each time, so that one slot was hit 3 times. Obviously obliterating that slot, but it meant the remainder of her team that had names that she had brought to life survived. If those hits were scattered, there was a real chance of several of her people being killed. So when she needed it, she rolled trip 8s. And I think that's the only time we've seen trip 8s all campaign. It was the time you needed it most.
I really did, and I remember being so confused at the time, thinking I was about to get decimated because I'd rolled like the highest value that I thought, like close to the highest value, until you explained it. Then I was like, oh, I just got really, really lucky. So it worked out quite well. Not for Kale.
Unfortunately, the rest of the team knew what was going on, but maybe my instructions weren't that clear. But this was one of those mini games, I guess, that I really enjoyed. I pulled a mini game similar to this years ago, and I didn't execute it super well, but I think it was executed better on this one. And I think the team, you guys really got into it, and having the NPCs that were named really made you not want to get hit, and I kind of liked that.
It's very true. So in that regard, when it comes to your players, what other ways do you feel like as a DM you help motivate them and bring them into the story? NPCs obviously something you use, and we've seen it works very well. What do you feel like some key points that you've used and that other DMs might have used or could use that would really help enhance their stories and role playing with their other team members?
Obviously, this is going to sound lame, but talk to your players. And in talking to Yosara, for example, she was explaining some things she wanted for her character. And what was able to be witnessed last session with her selling the museum curator to her goddess, she was given a tactical reward that buffs her character. It's light, but it's kind of powerful in its own right. And she did roll well on it, but even still, giving a rolling table to buff your characters instead of constantly rewarding them with magical items, I think is a better way to do it. And a reward for a warlock, which I think a warlock in a lot of ways is an underpowered character class that allows the warlock to achieve a higher power level that would be more equivalent to something like a paladin, which you have tanked many battles and taken down many foes, whereas Yosara by herself is not super deadly.
And that's fair. That's true. I will say, the items that you've provided us have been impactful in their own right when given. And I remember you gave us a bag that turned into an animal one time.
You guys sold that.
Yeah.
You guys broke her magic watch, and you guys are hard on your magic items now that I think about it.
Magic items, but you have to understand, none of us told Yosara to break that watch. None of us told her. She just thought that was the right thing to do at the time because it was a dire situation and people were dying.
Which, for the record, I had a concept of time built into every one of the Fey worlds that I'd even written in prior to sending you there, and that watch was a way for you to track time in relationship to the material plane or to another plane that was tied similar to the material plane. You could have figured out how much time you were gone, but by destroying that, now you have no idea. And I mean, I'm keeping track of time.
We're not, because
you can't because time passes differently depending on where you are.
Yep.
So because you have no concept of relativity, you can't keep track of time. It's like speed. If you don't know where you are in relation to another object, you can't tell how fast it's going.
True. I think the only time we even got an inkling of how much time had passed in the mortal plane was when we were in the astral plane, and that was like a peek at what was going on. And if any of you guys remember that session, the main point was we've got Xavier's beautiful scroll that depicts us and all different varieties of the, you know, accomplishments we had, which was really entertaining to see because we all started guessing and got mad at each other because we realized the watch was super valuable and we should have kept the watch. But again, you know, we moved on.
And how long have you guys been gone?
A while. Obviously. We really don't know. We think we're being worshipped as gods or in some way have sacrifices coming to us, considering my character had bodies hitting the astral plane when she waved her arms, which was quite disturbing. And then, what is it? Yosara had, oh my gosh, what did she have? She had all these trinkets, and then it was Ildren who had like all these other trinkets that were coming through. So it was pretty, I don't know. It was guesstimation. We're guesstimating how time goes because we don't know. We just know in certain realms it's very much stagnant. That was a fun
session for me.
Yeah, I sometimes wish we could jump back in the astral plane because I enjoyed that session a lot. But that's okay. Hi, Yosara.
Fun to be worshipped as a goddess.
Yes, it is. Yosara, who's sick, has decided to jump in chat. I hope you're feeling well, love. Okay, so talk with me because you've talked about maps. You talked about how to motivate your players. Talk to me about the mechanics of battle because I had limited experience when I come in, and it was obvious you had a variety of experience when it comes to directing your players with different scenarios and keeping the storyline moving. But how does combat to you really play into the story you're trying to create in your sessions?
I like that question. Okay. Combat has to mean something. I don't do random encounters very often. A combat encounter, I like to have some sort of an impact on the world around. So if you're fighting something, whatever you're fighting knows somebody or is a part of a bigger whole. The whole fight you guys were having with the gang and the zombies was going to develop into something bigger, but you guys kind of intimidated your way out of that, and then we led right into the heist, and I was like, you know what? Maybe this doesn't need to go any further, but if you had fought, it would have led into a further sub-storyline if you wanted to go that way. This is what I like about, I try not to, I hate the term railroad, but I try not to railroad too much. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to negotiate your way out of a scenario, I'll typically, and it's done successfully, with a combination of good rolls and good logic, good things to say, I'll typically drop a combat encounter and make it easier for your team to progress. If you're going to push, then and push for more violence, then the combat level will increase.
Okay. So I've seen
Rarely do I do rewards for just getting into fights. Mm-hmm. Rewards, if you look throughout things, have been for clever ideas or outthinking the scenario or just straight up outsmarting me. Mm-hmm. If I feel outsmarted, I feel inclined to give you guys some sort of a reward. Everything from a bag of, it's not a bag of holding, it was a bag of furry friend or something like that, yeah. Or a magical weapon or even a potion. If I feel completely outsmarted and I'm just dumbfounded, I'm like, I have to reward you guys. If you're just fighting to fight, then I feel inclined to just keep raising the difficulty, and you're probably not going to get too much out of that fight because that just encourages senseless violence. And I like violence with a purpose.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that because there have been moments where we've all taken a breather and we're like, wait a second, do we really need to fight this? And there have literally been discussions between the players with you watching on as we calm ourselves down from violence and end up talking our way out of situations. Not always in the best way, but we do end up talking ourselves out of more combat than we probably could have. Which the
flip side is, if you go back to Solace's Sanctuary, you were there to kill him. That was your intent. And true. During that escalation, Solace offered every single person a wish spell in order to not kill him, and nobody took it. I would have given you that wish. I don't know what that would have done to the campaign, but I was willing to just see, because this was a concept of somebody who was there to negotiate. And in the minute you pinned them against the wall and you started destroying his lair, which was the source of his power, you were actually harming, his hull and what he really was. So if you had stopped to negotiate then, you would have been able to get whatever you wanted. But then Solace would have continued, and that would have changed the direction of the campaign considerably.
True.
I'm very open to those ideas at certain times, and I try to plan in some concept for what if they negotiate with the leader of that whatever. You negotiating with Soon. Mm-hmm. I had two concepts for what happens if you just charge in there and say, no, you have to die, versus let's just talk about this, and you talk your way out of it, and you decided to just leave without incident. I had a full combat boss fight for what happens if you had fought that, and that would change the direction.
Which was interesting because in my mind, it was almost, there were like 4 different scenarios, because there was, we can go in and kill her, we can go in and talk, we can just burn the place, like everything to the ground, or I can accept what she's become and join that side, which ended up not being the choice that I made. But we do have a question from chat. Yusara is really curious to know, Alex, why you like traumatizing your players.
What DM doesn't?
Exactly what I'm thinking. Anyone who's DM probably enjoys it.
I think about DM in terms of legacy. 10 years down the road, if we're not playing together, you guys are one day going to talk about a DM you had back in 2022. And you're going to say, man, this DM X. Mm-hmm. And the more emotion you can put into that story, good or bad, the better I feel I am as a DM, unless it's straight up frustration anger. Frustration anger is the unjust anger. The DM cheated me. I don't like that. I like it when I felt cheated out of a wish because my character chose to attack the main bad guy, but I could have had a wish spell. Mm-hmm. That's okay. Or my goddess turned into a lover of whatever and not exactly what I thought, and now I don't know how I feel about this whole thing, and my whole emotions are toyed with. I love that.
Well, okay, my personal favorite. I did ask for that. Okay, I was given a scale, chat. I was given a scale to decide. So as a player for my character, I kind of asked for that to be shoved in my face. Just wanted to say that. But your third
what did I say? How dark and twisted do you want it? And you were
how
like,
dark and twisted do you want it from 1 to 10? And I was like, And I was like, 10's gonna be somebody dies or multiple people die on my team. Let's go a little lower so my whole team survives, but everybody else ended up dying, which was what ended up happening.
Yeah, I think you said an 8 on the twisted scale, and I was like, all right.
And then what was your third thing you were saying about DMs traumatizing their players? Legacy?
Yeah, it's for me, it's legacy. I never want you guys to feel cheated, like I just straight up manipulated the world around you. I think a good DM needs to build a world that makes sense in context, and even afterwards, you're looking back and like, man, I got screwed, but I understand why. Case in point, the Warriors Playground. Mm-hmm. There were some people who walked in there with a lot of gold and fat purses and walked out broke.
Yep.
But Kale never complained. He was like, that makes sense. Kale would not do well at a place like that. He lost a lot of gold. And
yep. And he would not have survived. I think some
people actually made gold. Yeah.
Yes, a few of us did make some gold. So another question that is, what moments have your players in your current session managed to tilt you as a DM with their actions or reactions to your story? Give us a few different examples of
okay. Again, Solace's Sanctuary, where you guys decided not to take the wish spell. I figure there was about a 30% chance somebody takes the wish spell. With 4 players, that's like a 90% chance somebody sells out the team to take the wish.
True.
In the past, when I have done something not even at that level, I've never offered wish spell before. In the past, somebody always took it. Somebody always betrayed the group and what they were supposed to do and took it. When you guys were learning about Princess Anna, I wasn't sure when you figured out the Shining Knight was Princess Anna. So I think some of you figured out before others.
So we honestly, to be honest, for me personally, I had an inkling that it was Anna as soon as we walked into the town and I first met the Shining Knight. I was like,
okay.
What? Because Anna had said she'd be there, and I was like, but I played it because I was like, okay, there's a reason for this. There's a reason this guy is here and Anna's not. And then as it got further, I kept trying to, as a player, learn if my other players knew what was going on. Like, it was constant battle for me of like, does Yosara just kill? Do they know? Do they understand the implications of if this is Anna? And then it developed into finally everybody agreeing, yes, we know who this is. Yes, they've been with us this whole time. I lost something to double check that just to have everybody confirm, by the way, in the session.
That surprised me too. I figured by then you all kind of knew.
Well, see,
and then
knew,
you were like,
but I was like, okay, I need to confirm it in the story because it's not like anybody that was watching would have understood that we all had come to this conclusion. You know, there was no guarantee that everybody knew. And so when I did that, it confirmed for me, and I knew it lynched it in for everybody. So then it was just a matter of how do we go about that. And then when we did it, we were all like, oh, well, not the worst time to have done it, but probably not the best time either.
Yeah, exactly. Which that's one of my favorite concepts for a bad guy, is a bad guy that steals a piece of your character sheet when he beats you, when he cuts you, when he makes a deal with you in this case.
Yeah.
I thought was really, really fun as a bad guy and someone you could grow to hate for several sessions as he's slowly taking pieces out of your character sheets.
I will say that was super impactful because I know especially for many of the characters we have in our session, it's limiting them on what we can do. Because if you truly remember, by the time we got done from the Warriors Playground, even into Soon's, we weren't truly resting. Like, we were just going. Like, the session, even though we would end in a certain good point where we were safe, we truly, our characters in themselves were not being able to rest fully, not being able to, like, recover. When we went in to fight Solace, the fact that we got out of there surprised the hell out of me. I mean, we lost somebody, but...
Which, again, gave you the option to bring him back, and
yes.
During that fight, there were several things people could have done to revive him, and... I didn't want to pull any punches with, he rolled a 1, I want to say, for his death save,
did.
which normally don't get NPCs more than, I'll give him 1 death save usually. But in this case, because he was your squire, I figured 3 death saves would be fine, but he rolled a 1.
Yeah.
And then he rolled less than that.
Yep. I remember you talking about that afterwards, how he definitely did not roll well, which just ended up being it. By that time, I think my character was a giant ape. Or gorilla.
Something like that, yeah. I think you got polymorphed.
I was polymorphed with no ability to truly do anything other than use my polymorph.
Kale was the only one who could have saved him, and he was doing other things at the time.
He was very focused on accomplishing the goal that we all set out, which is one of the reasons I think Alaric was in with us in the first place. You know, which was fine. We had fun with that. It was interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, and that was one of my... I probably shouldn't have done that. At one point, I started letting you guys collect NPCs, and I was like, this is probably a bad idea. The idea of the party traveling around with 1 NPC is a good idea. More than that, probably not a good idea. I
think you let us have...
It was 2.5 at one point.
Almost 3, though, technically, if you want to count Dimkin as an NPC.
Oh, yeah, and Dimkin. Well...
Maybe almost
we
4,
weren't sure
really.
if he was coming or going for a minute.
Yeah, so there was a lot.
Yeah, on his last session, it would have been 3, but...
Yeah, but it was quite interesting because we ended up losing 2 of them in the end. Not that it wasn't unexpected, because with how things were moving, it kind of was expected.
Yeah, so I probably shouldn't have done that, given them other motivation, but, whatever. It made sense at the time. I don't know what I was thinking, I guess.
Yeah, Alaric, the Kurgan, and Kale's sister. You're right, Yosara. She said that in chat. That's the 3 we had. Kale's sister got out of there as quick as she could, though. When given the opportunity.
Well, I was planning on having her split for a while there, but...
Yeah.
There was a reason for that, and then somehow you guys were saying something, I was like, oh, okay, I will let this go for another minute just to see what happens, and kind of forgot to get rid of her.
Yeah, because we brought her in because she needed to get away. And then we sent her back with all the supplies to free Dimkin, basically, in the mortal plane. Which probably by the time we get back, Dimkin's not even gonna, like, we're not gonna run into any of them if they are still alive, because time has moved so weirdly. So let me ask about the transition from us being in the mortal plane of Ferelden to the transition to Feywild. Like, setting that up, setting the boundaries for us. How did
So
that
the
come about?
Feywild's always been fun for me, and I treat it kind of like the multiverse. It's
simple.
like little shot glasses, each one full of a different kind of liquor.
Plates. We're not doing the shot glasses. If you've been with us, chat, you know it's always plates on a table. Come on now.
But I like it like the multiverse, where each one has their own rules, and I've tried to add 2 or 3 rules to every place. My favorite rule was, of course, Warrior's Playground, where every question is a wager. I liked that one. I don't think I've come up with one that was equally as interesting, but
that was hard. I'm not gonna lie, as a player, that was frustrating.
I thought that was kind of fun, and I had the concept of Samurai Valhalla in my kind of head, and I just literally was watching the show The Vikings at the time, and so I just read a very short, very chaotic article on Valhalla, and I was like, okay, just the snippets, and turned that into a world, and then added in the rule where every question was a wager. I thought that would be really fun to play in for a session or two, but that would get really old really fast.
It worked out well because I think, as time frame goes, we spent a couple of sessions there to like hash things out, and it worked out really well because it didn't feel too long to where it was frustrating, but it felt just enough in the storyline and the role playing that we got to the point we needed to do to continue moving forward to trying to defeat Solace. So
that's what I liked about the Fey Realm, is I gave you a specific number of keys, meaning we could only jump through a certain number of worlds, and then I give you a map. And I had kind of set these lines, not randomly. I kind of had a couple of paths that would work, that would allow me to come up with worlds ahead of time with specific rules and maybe a map or something to go with it. So they were like slightly larger than a quick one-shot. And each one was designed for a purpose, and I had a plan for it. And some of them were just loot grabs like Cinderlin, and then some of them were a little bit more involved like Temple of Soon, where it was dedicated to a specific player. And I liked that for a concept, but I think as we go forward, having one more of these and then going to a more structured storyline, I think is a good choice, because I think we've exhausted all the possibilities we can out of this for a little while. We should change things up.
Definitely. So in that regard and on that train of thought, what do you see that you can share with the viewers, even the players, in regards to the moving forward of this campaign and the continuation of our stream and For the Winds, like this particular session? Because, you know, if you've been interacting with any other D&D sessions, there's chapters, there's different groups. You know, obviously, you know, a restart with new characters and everything is something that does happen in D&D. But how far, and what is the future?
I have no intention of restarting. So
okay.
I think after Cinderlin, the survivors of Cinderlin will be going to the mortal plane. And from there, you will be learning more about your gods and goddesses that you have chosen, as Solace Draugorn, the warden of the Fae, is no more. Which means the boundaries between the Fae and the mortal realm are easier, much easier to traverse. So what would that mean if the gods of the Fae realm were able to interact with the mortal world? I don't know, but I'm excited to find out. And seeing that each of you have chosen deities, what is that going to do? Can you all remain friends and allies? Will your deities be in conflict? Is there a larger conflict going on?
True.
I'm excited to find out.
And that definitely throws into question, because we already know Soon is going after Tempest and wants revenge. We know that Titania wants help and wants more people in her realm, but doesn't want to really interact with the other Fae gods or goddesses out there. And we've yet to know truly what Ildren's lovely lady goddess that he worships wants and needs, but we definitely have gotten, I have gotten at least an inclination that it's going to be something quite interesting and maybe not very positive, but you know, I don't know yet. And I definitely think that'll be interesting to see.
I love what Yosara is doing with her character, and if she's watching right now, don't change a thing. I love it.
And then she's gonna flip it on her head just because you said that,
Yeah.
probably.
If I normally, I'm not big on alignment. I think alignment is a box you put your character in,
Hmm.
except for chaotic evil. That is somebody who just wants to break a campaign.
Yeah.
I would say Yosara's character truly embodies chaotic. And I love that about her character. And it's really, really fun because out of all the people's reactions that I worry about the most, Yosara is my number one. Whenever I'm doing something, I'm just like, oh god, I've got a plan for everyone, but I can't figure out what Yosara. I can't guess what she's gonna do.
Yeah, because she'll turn it on her head. There's been moments where we've been having active discussions and I've been leaning one way, and then she'll start talking, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, wait, yeah, we should think about this. So
Ildren has messed with my mechanics the most, but Yosara has messed with my plot the most, and her character is very hard to figure out. And now that she is communicating directly with her goddess, I'm excited to see what decisions she makes as a whole world of possibilities has opened itself. And being a warlock, I've always felt warlocks should be able to get boons from doing what their deity wants.
True.
And allowing her to get those boons and giving her a path to get those boons, I think could be very interesting for the campaign, because now her wants may not be the same as the team's wants.
Right.
And I like playing with motivation like that.
It's definitely going to be interesting to see what the future holds for each of them as they continue to go forward back into the world of Ferelden, back to where things have changed. Because they all know it. All of our characters know it. Like, going back to the mortal plane is not going to be the same. And there are definitely some key points that will probably be brought up to you as a DM for you to flesh out for each of their characters, for each of their wants.
Yours included.
Yep.
I mean, your goddess has clearly gone through something and is not the same goddess you know. So who knows what's going to happen with that one?
There was an interesting fact that I remember from my, I was just thinking about it, my character profile. I still have no idea where her lover is. The character, Sana's actual love was the whole reason all of this happened. Even though Soon tried to twist and say, well, it was because you prayed, which is true. But what did he do?
Oh, I remember.
You remember, see? And it's going to be interesting to see where that goes for Sana.
I have a plan. I'm interested to see how you mess up that plan.
I'm going to love to just probably throw it into a million different roller coaster loops. I think one thing I look forward the most as a player is getting back to the mortal realm and figuring out why in the astral plane dead bodies were appearing for me as a character.
Again, I have a concept for an answer, and I love the mystery box idea where you have this mystery box of we were doing things and it seemed like bodies and sacrifices were appearing. Some people would argue the mystery is the most interesting part, but I don't believe that. If you don't have a payoff that makes sense and adds to the story, then it was a bad mystery. And I'm really big on, once you solve that part of the riddle, it opens up a whole nother world of possibilities, and you realize that the solution for one chapter or one problem is the beginning question for the next problem. And I spent a lot of time on that one, and I think I have a very interesting answer for all of that will lead into more. So what I'm saying is there is an answer for it. It is not just some random thing that's happening.
I think that's really awesome. So can you kind of walk us through, when it comes to your preparation, obviously in keeping track of everything as a DM, because it can be a lot, even as a player, I find it sometimes overwhelming trying to remember everything my character can do to help impact the world around her. But how do you keep track of it, and how do you keep it, continue moving forward? And like you said, once the mystery is solved, opening up a new world.
Yeah, so I try to do things in bite-sized chunks. I try to stay 1 or 2 steps ahead of the party. The hardest one is if you're writing a branching narrative story, kind of like the original fight with Princess Anna and the 7 other star shapes that Kale saw. Kale was a star seer, and he needed to see something in the stars. So the concept of getting a piece of each of the main antagonist motivations and bringing those motivations to life was important. Well, to do that, you have to know what their motivations are. So I had to write out what each of the main characters' motivations, what their abilities, what their armies, what all of that looked like. And it all comes down to world building. I'm not storytelling. I'm world building. These are what the people are. Based off your actions, it determines what they would do. And I try to think logically. Even if somebody is stupid, if they're stupid and reacting on emotion and they see you doing something cool, they might try to outcool you. Mm-hmm. Okay, what would the coolest thing they could do, even if it doesn't make sense, be? And so I try to think in simple terms like that to give the antagonist their motivation. This way, it gives a living, breathing world for you guys to interact with. What's nice about the Fey realm is they're self-contained worlds. I can write 1,000 years of history in a very small amount of actual thinking because I can tell it in this pocket world. And because the pocket worlds have been separate, they're not interacting with each other. So it makes it a much smaller puzzle piece. And if everything goes to hell and my story doesn't make sense and you break it all, this world didn't work, but I can fix it for the next one. And by keeping them not interconnected and not majorly overlapping, it makes it much easier to write an interesting narrative in a shorter amount of time.
So I see how you focus, specifically on the Feywild, but then can you talk a little bit more about the Ferelden world in itself and how you've kept that narrative continuously moving? You mentioned, with Kale being Starseer, you said, right?
Yep.
And so how is that translated into the character building of, all the people we've encountered and the different...
So the messed up part is this scenario actually comes from something I lived when I was in Iraq and actually in the military.
Okay.
So I was doing intelligence gathering and we had 6 actually different factions that were vying for power in this area. Okay. And it was all about how they were vying for power and what they were doing. And I kind of added the Princess Anna undertone story as she was the one pulling all the strings, kind of. But what I did is I basically wrote out a star pattern I used PowerPoint, and just said, okay, this is what this person feels about the other 6. Gotcha. And just wrote that out. So this is what they feel, what they would do, what they wanted to do. And then I kind of created Solace as somebody who was not really part of the equation and started manipulating things to make it a little bit simpler. But by having their motivation and what they wanted and what they were willing to do, how far they were willing to go, it made it really easy to bring these characters to life because one of them was bound by glory. So they wanted a glorious fight. Even if they lost, they would survive in song and legend, and that's what they wanted. So it made it very easy for them to choose their decisions. They're going to choose whatever the most violent action is. Someone else is only going to be violent if it serves them. One other person is trying to impress somebody else, which I thought was very fun, is making the orc the maiden of the story.
Yes.
As the maiden is doing it all for love because he loved Princess Anna. And the idea that, the most violent person has the star symbol of the maiden, to me, I thought was very funny, but also made sense in character. Somebody who is in love will do potentially the most violent and crazy things to grab the other person's attention. So it felt very in character.
I agree. I thought that was a nice twist at the end because I remember our avid discussions on camera and off of, okay, hold on, who's what? And how can we use that knowledge to help us further our story and accomplish the goals we're after?
And when you guys started figuring that out, you guys confirmed 1 or 2 of them and you started to make guesses. That's when things started working out. And yes. I thought it was very important to reward your smart decision making. You guys were making smart decisions. You were interacting with people in the way that matched their motivations. As a DM, I have to reward that. That's what I want. Definitely. And I do believe this is a Matt Covell concept of whatever you reward, your players will do. So if I'm rewarding you for your smart thinking, for reading between the lines and understanding the subtext, then you're going to read more into the subtext and do the smart decisions and make the smart decisions. And I really enjoyed watching you guys make smart decisions and come up with clever and creative solutions.
And honestly, that's been a continuous theme that as a player, I've seen us continue to and execute as we've gone through these different worlds in the Feywild of what's going on, what's the underlying world we're dealing with, what's the underlying story that we're trying to figure out as we've encountered these different worlds. But my next question centers around you're building out the Ferelden story. You talk about logic, and you've talked about your own experience as a DM. Creating something from nothing seems to be, the initial impression people might get, but you're creating something from your own experience. How do you feel that differentiates, creating something from nothing versus creating from own experience and live events and the world that we live in, a normal world, and bringing it into fiction for your players?
Real experience, of course, is easiest because you lived it, but there's no reason that says you can't pull from some other piece of literature and disguise it. Have you ever seen the movie, I think it was 10 Things I Hate About You?
Yes.
With Heath Ledger. Heath Ledger, yeah.
Yeah.
That was, do you know what story that's a takeoff of? Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew.
Okay, that makes a lot
and
of sense.
It was a modern day kind of retelling of that. And that is, I mean, the two mediums couldn't be more different, right? Of a movie about teen dating versus Taming of the Shrew, which is I want to call it a medieval kind of legend. I mean, it's a legend. It's a play about a legend of a guy who has to marry off his sister. I can't remember exactly how it works, but the bottom line is it's Shakespearean, and this story is redone Shakespeare. Just pull from something that you enjoyed. If you want to make a political narrative, which I pulled from something that I saw as a political narrative. If I really wanted to pull from something like that and I couldn't pull from real life, Game of Thrones is great.
Yep.
If you want to do a good versus evil story, Lord of the Rings is kind of the gold standard of good versus evil.
Yeah. That's true.
Star Wars actually is a great narrative if you strip out all of the actual stuff that Lord George Lucas did, and you actually go down to just the bare bones of a guy's father seems to turn evil, and the kid believes in him even though his father represents the guy who's running the opposing military. I mean, that's a very interesting story.
Very interesting, considering how much it's continued to impact the media and all sorts of books that have come out for it. I mean,
probably a conversation for another time, but yes. Yeah,
just saying,
but Star Wars, the original trilogy, has some really great inner family conflicts you can pull from, and you can just rearrange that into something that makes sense. Maybe in your story, it's the son or the child that becomes the antagonist and is leading the enemy military, and then you have to ask. You don't tell your players to join the enemy military or to stop them. You find out what they would do. Mm-hmm. And the older I get, the more I side with the Empire, actually.
You're not the first person that I've heard say that, actually.
Yeah, what would happen if Luke was like, you know what, guys? I think we're actually terrorists, and maybe we should stop and turn his X-Wing on Red Squadron.
Like literally walk in there, be like, yeah, I'm taking over with my dad. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, honestly, I think I would love that. In Star Wars Episode 8, which was my least favorite of all the Star Wars movies ever, it was a golden opportunity when Rey reaches for Kylo's hand. If Kylo reaches for Rey's hand, if Rey had said yes. And then you had Rey and Kylo ruling the First Order, attacking the rebels. That would have been amazing. That would have been great.
Yeah.
That would have been a really good twist, and a movie that seems so keen on, let me just throw out all of the other stuff.
Right.
That would have been an amazing twist. And whether maybe you could argue whether or not they were good or evil.
It would be a continuous argument, I think, that we could go on forever.
If they had spent a little bit more time building up the Senate or whatever as corrupt and ignoring the common man and arguably evil in their own right, that would have been a great story, and that's where the world building comes in.
And that's the biggest thing you think for as a DM, like the number one thing is
DMs need to
building.
world build, not storytell. I like to build a world that feels lived in. When it came to the 7 leaders that you guys were presented with, you guys could have sided with basically any one of them.
True. We could have.
And if you had chose the human path and turned your back on the orcs, that would have been telling in one way, and it would have been completely justified.
Yep.
If you would have said, no, we're not going to charge ladders against this wall, we're going to defect and go to Pineland because we think he's the good guy, then you would have been fighting against those ladder teams you had just made, and you would have had a real chance of killing your own people, and you could have won.
That's true. And I think what's interesting, too, is if you think about each of our own character builds, a dynamic we brought to the group itself. You know, one hates one realm, one sides with them and supports them because of their own, you know, designations, their own ambitions, and their own presentations in the world. Another is just literally like, I was just trying to be cool.
Yeah.
And has an enemy. And then the last one at the time literally was like, we were just, it was their idea, but now everybody's after me, you know? And so.
Yeah, and that was, I created a Punnett Square, and I said, sides with government, sides with people. And I wanted to make sure you all had an X in a different category. So there were 2 factions, 2 main factions, and I wanted to make sure 2 of you sided with the main faction government in opposite factions, and then 2 of you had ties to the main faction people in opposite perspective. One of you loved the other people, and then one of you hated their own people. And that gave a really good dynamic where you could have justified your decision for going left or right, or just saying, screw it, we're not playing any of these games. We're going over there with the Pineland guys who are about to get their asses kicked because they're the underdog. And that would have been completely justified.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I'm pretty sure that would have written a whole new story in of itself.
Completely, yeah.
I mean,
but
the way the campaign
that's part of the power of writing a story like this is the maps would not have changed, and I'd already had the maps pretty well built out because I've been doing maps for several years now, so I just recycle the maps to some degree.
That's fine, yeah.
So then it just becomes the story and what the NPCs were doing. Well, the NPCs are already built and fleshed out, so then it's just about your action, so it's really not that much work if you guys decide to go completely off grid.
And that's where it's the world building, right? That's what you've done.
That's where it's world building as opposed to storytelling. If you find yourself storytelling as a DM, you end up creating a lot of work because you're like, what if they go left as opposed to right? Well, honestly, I don't really care. All that stuff is built. Yeah. So how you guys interact with the characters is what tells the story, and that's interesting to me.
So you would say then DM's job is the world building while the players are the storytellers.
Absolutely, 100,000%.
And that's
if I'm ever remembered for saying one thing in D&D, it's the DM builds the world, the players tell the story. And if a DM is storytelling and really saying to themselves, I want the players to do this and pushing the players in one direction, you know, that's okay to some degree, but I tend to just shrink the box you're in. And at some point someone is like, screw this, let's go off Ferelden. I'm like, nope, can't do that. Right. Can't do that because that's not where the story is, and I'm not rewriting a whole nother story. The story is what's going on in Ferelden. So this is where the story is. That I think that's totally fine and totally justified. And if somebody wants to pull in some details from outside the world, you know, you can be a little bit, you can put discretion on that and say, no, that's not really a part of this. And there was a few times I had to do that where it's like, yeah, you know, calling in another fleet is just not an option right now. For whatever reason. And I that just narrows the world because otherwise you can get bogged down with a world that's too big to manage. And I don't think that's wrong. I think that's important as a DM to build a world that the players can interact in. And there's no shame in shrinking the size of that world.
And putting limitations on it too, because even though you're letting your players react, you're also trying to put these, you know, walls, these barriers in front of them and provide challenges, mysteries, things that'll entice them down different paths.
Yeah, absolutely.
Built out.
Yeah, and I really select players for the team where you say, hey, look, it's taking place on this island, and then someone's like, screw this, I'm swimming away. Like, well, you're actively trying to not engage with the story I've built. I don't want players like that. I want
Right.
players who are going to test the limits of the story they're in. That's totally fine. I encourage that. But it's hard when a player is just like, I want to throw this whole story out the window.
Right.
Well, that's where punishment comes in, like in the Warriors Playground. When you guys realize death wasn't permanent, death is fine. You can die anytime you want. Who cares?
Right.
But then the concept for me of being thrown in a cage and drown repeatedly, so all you know is 4 to 6 minutes of drowning every morning for potentially months, that's terrifying. Yeah, exactly. Because if you're put in there for...
The idea and the concept just freaked me out a little bit. Not that I've ever had the fear of drowning, but the fact that you were literally stuck in a loop. And it's funny because I think I had watched a movie not shortly after that one of the offshot characters, that was the concept. They were immortals in a modern world, and they got trapped in
Old Guard.
That would, the Old Guard on Netflix.
Yeah, so somebody accused me of pulling that from Old Guard. I actually hadn't seen Old Guard at the time. I actually pulled this from, I want to say, a Dracula movie from the early 2000s, something like that, where they caught Dracula and they just threw him in a crate and like threw the crate in a river, or in case
there's a couple of different
that.
ones where they've encased him in a specific coffin. Like there's different versions of that, and like he's sealed in a certain way, and it's forever like a torture because there's no way to revive until like certain circumstances make it to where the character can come back. I think when I thought about the cage you talked about in there, I was immediately thinking of Waterworld, and like the first initial scenes where they're like literally he's about to sink into this mud and just be consumed, which was so it's not a new idea. No, it's not. And anyways, I think we've kind of talked about rehashing and rebuilding different worlds that have already been created in fiction and stories is something that can be used.
Hey, Char, come here. My little one's in here.
Chat, you'll get to say hi.
Charlotte, come here. Come here. No, okay. She doesn't want to get on camera. No. She's closing the doors to my office.
I love the fact that she sometimes comes in and does say hi to us.
I don't know. I am on camera right now, but you're welcome to have some.
Still Christmas.
I don't know. Find me, book?
And there's Char.
Happy birthday to you.
Come here, Charlotte. Charlotte, come here. Toss her to me. I want to put her on camera for a second. She's saying no, no, no.
Char's like, no. She knows. He's put her up on camera a couple of times for us to see when we put on break or something.
Yeah, she just wants to run around right now.
She's
afraid I'll put her to bed. Oh, man. She had some Halloween candy the other day and ran around in circles for 45 minutes. That's not an exaggeration.
I feel like I used to do that when I was little. It's okay.
Yeah.
They'll eventually grow out of that.
Jacked
and they'll just vibrate in their seats.
Pretty sure this is expensive sake.
Yeah. We're drinking expensive sake like it's Kool-Aid right now.
Hey, whatever floats your boat. That's the other thing. We all usually like to have drinks or snacks around when we stream, and we'll take a break in between to grab some refreshments, which is nice.
So this is Emily. I keep saying that I want to teach her D&D one day. Nothing else, just for her accents. She is amazing with voices, unfortunately.
I love that. Welcome.
You do the Russian?
Oh, God.
You can do it on stream. Come on.
Yeah, you're on stream right now. You
say stream?
Yeah, we're streaming. Yeah. You
say who's watching?
Probably
we've got a few of our friends watching us.
Hola. I don't know if I can just go into
it. Say
that on like spot. Like
all right. Say good evening. This is Emily in Russian.
Yeah.
Oh wait. Because I'll come off Transylvanian or something. I'll go into like a
I will have no
good
clue.
Evening. No, that I can't because I can't just go. Hold on.
She's got to get into character.
It's okay. You might have to.
She's got a few of them though. I would love to be that good at accents.
It'd be awesome. You'll have to get her to come and do like a one shot with us.
It takes me a second to get to Russian because I have to hear it and then I can do it.
I know.
Oh, I feel that.
It's one of those. If she ever did this, she'd have to play a changeling and just change up her accent every session.
Like there's some right into like British or something, but like
oh yeah, those are pretty easy.
Hold on.
There's certain words.
I'm terrible at it though. I think
there's certain words when you like learn accents that can trigger you how to do it.
Drinking sake. No, I can't.
She's laughing too hard.
Yeah, it's the sake.
Sure.
It's expensive sake.
Yeah.
It's too much. It's
Hold
too
on.
much.
If I could do the other one better. I could do the
Emily, our daughter is playing with the electric socket. Can you?
Oh, Daddy needs that.
Char. Bad Char. Get away from electricity.
Listen, your father needs this. You need to stop right now, okay?
There she goes. Oh,
Tell me what's going to suck the candles.
oh, such a sweet
I'm
baby.
not even. Oh! Jinky soupy.
This is what he deals with on the regular when he's not with us, chat. This is his life behind the scenes of Alex the DM.
This is my life.
Behind the scenes of Alex the DM, everyone. He is just human, don't worry. Even though he likes to torture his players, and his players like to tilt him out when he gives us challenges, he lives a normal everyday life.
Sorry
Great.
about that. But yes, the Char has a stinky poopy. And
I can do this one.
Okay.
I was in labor and he's eating that beef jerky and it smells so fucking good. I was like, get the fuck out of here.
Love it.
Get the fuck out of here. I was about to kill him, seriously, because I was just salivating. I wanted to eat that beef jerky during that labor. I was like, I'm going to punch you in the fucking face if you don't leave right now.
I can actually see that. That's good. Oh, Char.
oh yeah, poor little pup.
That's great. Because that's something I hear, like, I used to hear that from my cousins all the time. She sounded perfect for it. They're up over.
Oh, she's really good at accents.
That one's something I understand. I like it.
Yeah, I think if I was better at that, we'd have 3 times as many people watching.
Well, I don't even think that's always necessary, but that's definitely something you can encourage with players. I think the biggest part is you building the world and the players having a compelling story and regular content coming out. You know. Yeah,
which I still would love to add on another player. I'm still reaching out to people and seeing who would work, but I'm being very picky and choosy, just because it's hard to find a good player. I think it's easy to find a decent DM, hard to find a good player.
Yeah.
But you only need 1 DM though. That's the thing. You need like 5 players who can actually work together, or 4 players.
True, and that's where it gets on, the preference thing. And I've talked to other people. I think you like playing a character just as much as you like DMing, but you find skill and accomplishment in your DMing. Wouldn't you say so, Alex?
I like DMing more.
Yeah.
Being a player once in a while is great, especially it's so much lower work. And I don't have anxiety being a player. I have anxiety being a DM because if my players aren't having fun, if they're not engaging, if they don't feel satiated in their story, I feel like I'm failing my players. And there's so many times where I'll walk into a session being nervous about it, like, oh no, I really hope they like this. And those are the sessions that always go well. It's the ones where I'm like, this is gonna be great. Where I walk away going, shit.
That did not go the way it should have.
Never go. No, it's the higher my anxiety, the better the session. And I'm not sure if that's just because I'm a pessimist at heart, and the more work I put in, the more worried about that work, or if it's the more nervous I get, the more on my game I am. But most of the sessions where I've been really nervous going in, I felt the best after the session. Museum heist, I was really worried. I was like, oh, I've got this like script for how the bad guys are supposed to behave. And there was a chance that it was going to be over in like 10 minutes. And I didn't want to like, oh yeah, it turns out rocks fell, this door's closed, you got to go the other way. No, like that never happened. It all felt organic.
And I think that's the beauty of it, is just being able to have a session that does feel organic is the most fun. And I
agree. And I think that comes down to good world building. And good world building follows basically 3 simple principles. Mm-hmm. It has unique rules. This is fantasy. It has to have unique rules. Otherwise, we're playing real life, and that's boring. Mm-hmm. 2, those unique rules have to be part of the world and feel organic. it doesn't feel organic. Like if we were using the Warriors Playground rules where death wasn't permanent in the museum heist, I don't think it would feel organic. Or if we had, soon suddenly pop up and weird things going on in the museum, it wouldn't feel organic to me.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is it has to accent the story. And in this case, it was a really simple part of the story of Ildren had something he wanted to steal. But in the past where you were in Temple of Soon, I felt it accented the story because the bad guys, the world, the creations, the terror, all accented that story. The Warriors Playground, Kale being the most gentle soul, came from one of the most violent places and was basically a slave there. Like all of that feels like it accented the story to me. And if you can build a world with organic rules, it's accenting the story your players are trying to tell, and it all feels organic, that's good world building to me, and I really strive for that.
Awesome. Our chat wants a dragon.
Wait, they want to drag on, as in they're saying I'm talking too much?
They want a dragon in the story.
I mean, we had a, what's it called, where it's an undead dragon. It was an undead Hydra.
We had the undead Hydra, and soon we had the couple Mirage-style interactive dragons.
Which I loved that, by the way. The Mirage it was a illusion dragons.
The one
which
that
I love illusion spells. I love illusion.
Alaric ended up killing.
Yeah, killed an illusion dragon. Well, I think that was a real dragon, but at some point there was an illusion dragon where someone just summons a dragon.
Oh yeah, no, that was in Pineland when we were like trying to end everything. Somebody summoned an illusion of a dragon. And we were on the crossroads with those. That wasn't a real one, but it was still magically brought there.
Yeah.
But no,
but I love the illusion spell, and I pull no punches on that. That is one of my favorites of somebody who should not be able to summon something, and I love that one. And it usually plays the party for a fool for about 2 turns, and that's about how long it lasted. And I think you guys figured it out after 2 turns, because someone crit failed when they fired at it the first time.
Yep, that was true. They did. We did.
Yeah, so it was like, oh,
it was bad at first. I remember that. So then talk to me about some of your favorite spells and specifically like DM or story playing techniques when it comes to building the world that you're like, okay, that's good. You know, we've talked about the Warriors Playground where death didn't matter. Not really. Unless you were being punished. Yeah. But what are some of the other concepts that you use presently or in the past or that you might use in the future that just are really some of your favorites? Or some of your least favorites?
The concept of escalation.
Okay.
I like the concept of the dramatic music building as you're building up to something, and I think it's best if it lasts about 30 to 45 minutes. Any longer than that, it can drag. The assault against the wall was a lot longer, but I think the intensity slowly built to the point where it had its climax with the fight on the top of the wall. But that session was designed for that. But in the concept of escalation, as you guys were moving your ladders from the outskirts, you guys started taking ballista fire, and the chances of getting hit was about 25%. It was 5 out of 20. And you guys were like, oh, this is easy. Then all of a sudden you crossed a line that was marked clearly. And then all of a sudden that number went up to 50%. And then the enemy fired an incendiary round and set half the ground on fire. And the closer you were to the light, the higher the chances of getting hit.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it was 75 or 80% or even 90 if you were in the light in the right range. And suddenly it was like, oh my God, we got to get out of here. And then as soon as you get out of there, there's a brief respite. Everything drops as you realize you're out of ballista range. You're too close to get fired upon. But then you realize that the wall soldiers have ways of attacking you, and now you're fighting them directly. You can see the enemy, and you can attack the enemy, and you can kill the enemy. So then it goes from fear to anger, and we got to get over this wall. We got to attack them. We got to fight them directly. But the enemy's not stupid. They're readjusting their forces, and if one person attacked alone, like Kale, they were going to swarm them, and that's exactly what happened. And then as you guys are coming over the wall, again, that anxiety increases again as you watch one of your friends' army is getting decimated. So now you realize the threat of violence is higher the closer you get to the wall. So one person could hang back, which happened. Two people can assault the wall. You can be the woman on the wall all by herself.
Yes, that was fun.
And the other thing that goes into all of that world building, all of that intensity, is the victory that comes afterwards. You guys solved all of this. You guys defeated the enemy. You guys made smart decisions. But one, there were casualties. There always has to be a cost to it. And the NPCs were that cost. But then the victory comes out in the stories afterwards. And I actually spent a lot of time writing the stories afterwards, from that mural at the end of the campaign to kind of commemorate it, to literally the bar stories of Dimkin biting off the guy's dick and throwing him, which did not happen.
Did not happen
but
at all.
The idea that, you know, a dwarf managed to push a commander off the tower, that's too lame. Something greater had to happen.
Of course.
And so in the eyes of the bard, in the eyes of the storyteller, it had to be greater. And giving you that reward of retelling your deeds in a fantastic fashion that has that granule of truth in there, I think is a magical thing. That's an inside joke that only people who have seen the session can really experience.
Yes.
And when you're experiencing it in the moment, it's glorious, because you're like, what I did mattered, and it feels big, and it feels grand, and it feels exciting. I love that part, and I love bringing your deeds to life in some sort of a story. So that's important to me in the world building of building a system of escalation to make the danger greater as you go through the challenge, and then giving you the reward on the other side of something amazing, either an item or an experience, or my personal favorite, a story about the deeds. And the greater the danger, the greater the reward, the greater the story.
Honestly, I think that is something that I'm going to look forward to the most as a player, is going back and seeing the escalation from our absence based on the time frame, you know, because I know it's going to be something interesting, and that it's then going to impact, because of our actions in the Feywild, will impact the regular world. And so having this discussion, you know, definitely highlights how much fun that's going to be.
I am straight up giddy about all that stuff. And that's where a lot of my efforts have been, is literally sitting around while I'm either working or, you know, taking a break, or before I go to bed, I think about, what is the worst case scenario? What is the best case scenario? What would happen if these worlds were real? What would people say? What would they experience? What would they do? What would they write? What art would they make? And I love the idea of telling the stories of the world through artwork. I just went to Italy, and Italy has these great murals on some of their cathedral doors, and they tell stories from the Old Testament or the New Testament or a battle or something like that. And it's a mural, and it's one frame, usually about this big, that has maybe 10 people in there, no words.
Yeah.
And they tell so much out of this story, and I love that as a medium for storytelling. Is you get one frame of a comic to tell the story of a great deed, a great battle. What would that look like?
What would that snapshot
be? I like that. Yeah, what would that snapshot be? If I was a better artist, I would actually draw these out.
Well, I know I definitely can't help you there. I'm not artistic in that way. I'm not good at drawing. But if you were, or if one of us was, or if we had somebody that is a part of our following that would like to draw something like that out, that would be an amazing thing to see.
Yeah, reach out to me on Discord. I'll tell you what I want. Or you can make one of something you've already seen, but I have some ideas here of things that I'd love to bring to life.
I'll have to think about that. That'd be something pretty cool to have as a part of our channel. So, okay, escalation. What are some mechanics then, you know, talking about players use as well as DMs use in Dungeons and Dragons that you think are the worst? Just like, why is this even a part of Dungeons and Dragons? Who put this in the manual that we could use this?
I don't use travel mechanics very often. Travel mechanics make sense. And it was punishment for trying to leave the story. Or punishment for trying to go between stories, as you would have to fight random encounters and things like that.
Right.
I don't like random encounters a lot because they don't tell a story in any way. The idea that you're just fighting some random goblin doesn't mean anything to me. The idea that some orc stops you on the road, you decide to kill him. Well, now you have just killed one of the tax collectors for one of the other guys that you're supposed to be working with. That's a much better story. How is he or she going to take the fact that you just murdered somebody who was doing their job? I like that concept so much more. And I always try to give an out. Right. I usually want you to sacrifice something, maybe sacrifice gold, which we haven't used a lot of the gold. I've given you chances to shop or whatever, but we don't spend a lot of time shopping. But when it happens, items are typically expensive. There's not a lot of buying. But gold does have a value because it is your get out of jail free card for a lot of these things. You can sacrifice a certain amount of gold to get out of an incident, or it has had its uses in story. I like that a lot better than just spending, hours going through shopping tables, buying magic items. Mm-hmm. So with that, it kind of goes into the concept of gold. I don't know if I use it really well or really terribly. I've heard it both ways. Because we don't use it a lot, but when it happens, it's very impactful. And I try to make it a part of the story of something like this, the Warriors Playground, where gold was literally how many times you could fuck up when asking a question.
Right. That's why we ended up getting rid of some people on the group's gold, because we did not need them to screw up anymore.
Exactly. And the concept of you were in a world where you couldn't just give gold to somebody. You couldn't do it. Yep. They would have to lose bets to you or win bets to you. I thought was a fun mechanic of this is just a weird world where gold has a material, like almost gold has a part of the meaning to the person itself. I liked that. And I like assigning more of an intrinsic value to gold than just exchange this for better stats. I think that's kind of lame. And I don't like that. I think there needs to be also a penalty for dying or getting knocked out. The penalty I use is you take a scar, which becomes a part of your character, and I note that in the notes section on Fantasy Grounds, but also you're temporarily reduced in stats by just a couple.
Oh yeah, and we've seen that be played really effectively in certain sessions that we've had. And we've seen it recently mostly happen with Ildren continuously getting smacked down in certain sessions.
Yeah.
If any of you guys have been watching us, Ildren, love him to death, but his character gets in certain sticky situations that we had.
It's as squishy as a sponge, yeah.
He is so squishy. And my character, Sana, often gets frustrated with him because she wants to be there, as she knows she's the one that needs to be taking the hits. So she knows she's the one that can take the hits, but somehow he always ends up in front of her in some way or fashion and ends up being squished. And she's coming over trying to make sure he's not squished any more than he already has been squished, to say the least.
Yeah, the ironic thing is when I first read about Blade Song in Tasha's Cauldron, I thought it was overpowered. And when I read about it originally, I was like, this feels really overpowered. But now seeing it in action, I'm like, nope.
It's fine.
It's fine.
Totally fine.
Which kind of goes into, I know so many DMs fear players with higher stats than the others. So our team is poorly balanced.
Oh, yeah.
You, in terms of tanking damage, can tank more than the other two combined.
Yep.
And your damage output is medium, but when we had Dimkin, his damage output was extreme. So it was very unbalanced in every way. I actually like that. Like I said, I love tactics. So I'm going to put foes in your place that I don't need to worry about following a standard like difficulty curve, and I don't like the standard difficulty curve, like the SWAT team. They weren't that tough, but they dealt a lot of damage, and that's typically how I build my bad guys, is more glass cannon style, where they die pretty easily, but they can output a lot of damage. I think that makes combat faster, and this party, which does not output a lot of damage, it means you can actually kill your foes, but it means your foes are actually just as deadly to you.
And you have to be careful too.
Yeah,
you really do as a player.
And it adds to the danger of combat. I mean, there haven't been too many fights where you guys were just like, okay, everybody online, let's just go in, guns a-blazing, and just tank this fight. You've always had to think about tactics of hitting and running, watching for cover, let's fire and fall back. And it means that your characters in story, they're tough, but you're not immortals, you're not demigods, you're tough motherfuckers, but you're also not able to take on the gods themselves, and you know that. And I think it matters when 4 SWAT team members damn near took down one of your characters in one barrage of bullets.
Yep. I think that's one thing that I found pretty great about our player interaction is, we know our characters are mortal. Like I've almost died multiple times.
Yeah, I think everybody has.
Each one of us has, and there are moments where the logic of what I as a player have been trying to accomplish, but what is happening to my character is counterproductive to what I've been trying to do. And the team is like, especially when we were in Solace's prisons and we were trying to go through the realms, and they're like, stop impaling yourself on the spike, Sana. And I'm like, but guys, and like I'm bleeding out and dying, and I'm trying to tell them my whole goal is one of us needs to touch the platform to get out of here.
That was one of my favorite, even though I felt that little challenge kind of drug on a little bit more than it probably should have. That was one of my favorite interactions where Solace was right there offering you a way out at the cost of a piece of your character sheet. You could have got a lot out of that. You could have asked for magic items. You could have got but it would have come at a cost of your character sheet. And most players aren't willing to do that. I loved that as a mechanic, that you could have got off that spikes just by asking for it.
Oh yeah, there were multiple times Mink's character appeared and was like, I'm right here. And I remember looking at that character like, I remember looking at you as you playing that character being like, screw you, fuck off, get away.
And that to me is part of the fun of it, of if your character died, I would have felt zero bad.
Yeah.
I would not have felt bad at all because I was giving you a guaranteed way out. And I think that's always important, that DMs give their characters a way out. But it comes at a cost, and if you're not willing to play that, then you're risking your character. I don't do insta-death in any category for the most part. I don't think I've ever insta-deathed somebody. There's always been a cost or a way to avoid death, but it could have come at a cost that the person wasn't willing to pay.
It's true.
I mean, I've killed plenty of players, probably about 10 players in my playing. But every time the player died, every time the character, I haven't killed any players.
Sorry, not real players.
Every time the character died, the player was always like, I get it. I see why I died. Or they felt that afterwards when they saw what was behind the curtain. They were like, I did not figure that out. I'm like, well, was there enough information there? And every single time they've said yes.
There was a moment when I was on the wall, when I was impaled, and I didn't have everything, right? That I remember thinking I could just let her pull herself off and fall straight down. Like, it doesn't matter. She's dying.
It would have been so interesting.
I think about that so many times.
Like, subtly, I was really hoping you were. And at one point, Yosara was just like, what's below the clouds? Let's figure it out.
I remember that, and I remember just being like, Sana could just fall. She's had so much happen to her. Just if instead of letting her, like, I remember thinking, if I roll bad and I'm that low that I can't get up, maybe I should just let her slip off the spikes and fall straight down. I remember that was one of the things I had thought about really hard, but the team ended up saving me, and inadvertently.
And that's part of the fun idea of that is I try to reinforce. I always use the rule of threes. Are there 3 ways I can make Solace the spider? If I can do at least 3, that's important. And one of them, his lair was shaped like a web.
Yep.
And as you guys went around the lair, it exposed more of it, and it actually started to look like a spider web the further around you went.
Yep.
The concept of you can't go through a spider web by walking along the web, you have to go through the holes, I thought was, important too. A spider wants to trap you and slowly drain you of your life. And there was 1 or 2 other things. The concept of multiple eyes. He's got eyes everywhere.
Right.
little things like that. I really tried to bring the concept of the spider to life, so that when you're looking back and you put it all together, you're like, how did we not see this?
Right.
And if you
it was that
if
way.
you feel that
yeah.
that's how you know you had a good mystery, when everyone's like, oh my god, now I feel stupid, it was all right there.
Right. But then what's great about the players in that aspect, if you putting that in front of them, is their character's reaction. Because I remember clearly, like, I knew what they were doing. I, as the player, knew, okay, this is what's about to happen. But I had to play my character in the completely opposite direction. I remember making my player so mad when she finally fell through the web that everybody just left her behind. No one wanted to communicate what was happening. And like that inadvertently caused more tension in the final battle, because Sana didn't want to talk to anybody. She wanted to just kill that motherfucker in front of her. Like, she was totally done. I mean, and I think, in the end, my character was like, oh, we just lost our apprentice because of this. But there could have been others that could have helped save them, because he wasn't just her apprentice by that time. You have to admit, everybody was invested in him. But yeah, that's great. Those are some of the great things that we've definitely done and accomplished. So it's fun. We've been going for about
90 minutes.
An hour and a half. Yeah, 90 minutes.
Cool. Yeah, we can wrap it up here if you want.
It's up to you.
Anything else?
I'm trying to think if there's other things. Because a lot of the questions I had, we focused on a lot of them. What are some things that you would recommend as a DM for anyone starting out in Dungeons
I hate
and Dragons?
druids.
Oh, okay. Well, damn.
I felt the need to say that. I hate druids. Druids are my least favorite class. I think it would be a fun class to play, but as a DM, they're my most frustrating class because everybody takes way too long in combat. Fantasy Grounds does not do polymorph well and shape change well. It is the one drawback of Fantasy Grounds.
Okay.
And too many times I find people want to shapeshift into things, but they have no idea what they can do.
Right.
And I'm not going to memorize all of their shapeshift ability animals. Right. They need to know that stuff. Hate druids.
Okay.
I just hate druids.
Personal preference there, chat. Don't think you can't play a druid if you're in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. You totally can.
And I knew I hated druids before I had Kale play, so that's my way of saying I'm open to druids at my table. I just hate them.
He dislikes them. So what he's also saying, I think, is you need to know your character. And that's something I personally, as a player, continue to struggle with, because there are things that I know Sana always has an intimidating presence. Technically, people should be always scared around her. There's always should be saving roles, but we don't always play it that way because it doesn't call for that in certain scenarios. That she should always be able to assist her comrades because she's a sentinel. She can go and do things, but it doesn't always work out, And so,
I would
again,
knowing your character, knowing what they can do, and knowing what all of their
passive and active abilities.
Yeah, passive and active stuff. That's hard. I think Druid is the most complicated class, just in the way their spells work and all that. And a lot of their spells require some sort of a judgment. You compare it to even Wizard for the most part, where it's like mostly damage spells and things like that. I mean, they've got Wizards can get the most spells, so over time they do become probably the most complicated. But up to about level 10, I would argue Druid is probably the most complicated for the most part. Paladin has a lot of passive spells, and that's just a lot to keep track of. But
you're telling me,
when it comes to that stuff, a lot of times I just leave it on the players, and if their character doesn't remember it, if the player doesn't remember what the character is doing, I just rule it in the time. I try to remember as much of that stuff as I can. But there's just a lot to remember, and we play once a week, and that's just enough to slowly get better, but not enough to get better fast. If we play twice a week, then all of the stuff would get rehashed twice a week.
Oh yeah.
And that's where you really start to get better at anything. Once every 7 days is just not enough.
It's true. That's why I started writing certain aspects and abilities down. When I pull out
Yeah.
my journal, it's because, okay, we're about to get in a fight. Something's going to happen. I know I have a passive ability that should affect something in the scenario. And half the time, honestly, I don't end up using it as a player because of the reactions of my fellow players. It's like, okay, will this help the situation? Maybe. Like there were
Yeah, we actually
moments-
don't do a lot of combat if you look at it by time.
Yeah.
We average somewhere around 30 minutes per 4 hours
Yep.
of combat, which is pretty low. If you compare our group to something like, hate to use them, but Critical Role,
Very
they do
popular.
about 1.5 hours per 4 hours of combat. But the flip side is their combat encounters tend to drag a lot longer than ours.
Right.
We'll fight 6-7 guys in the same amount of time that they'll fight 2.
Yep.
And again, it's the style of combat that I use where it's higher damage, lower life. And because we're using Fantasy Grounds, things are just a lot faster. I
It
would
helps.
love Critical Role if they used Fantasy Grounds or something like that, where they just needed to double click, it would assign the number, and then they could move on. But so many times I see them one up, one downing a dice that makes a difference. And it's fine. They pull it off, but I think it slows
preference, too.
combat, and that's what I love about Fantasy Grounds is you roll, right then and there if you hit.
Yeah, and I think that's 100% a preference thing when it comes to how you like to
Mm-hmm.
DM and the styles you like to play too. Because the program helps, but in and of itself, you would want to do that regardless, I feel like. As a
Yeah,
DM.
and Fantasy Grounds in a lot of ways is baby's first DM. It doesn't require the players to do much. As a DM, the lift is much higher in Fantasy Grounds because you, the DM, have absolute control. I can even recode the system if I want, and just adding in all of that stuff. So you just need to drag and drop the dice or double click it or whatever. I think it really speeds up the game. I think the math doesn't make it fun to me. I know that was an old school part where people are like, well, I'm old school. I like to feel the dice in my hand and all that. I get it. I've played that way, and it does feel a little bit more organic, maybe romantic. But in terms of storytelling and speed and pace, I like the pace of Fantasy Grounds allows you to run things. And I think it's better for a newer crew.
I would definitely agree. I think the one thing I like most about Fantasy Grounds is I'm not having to overthink things and calculate things. It allows me as a player to role play more and memorize my character sheet and know which actions will be the most impactful. Like, for example, when we were running the museum heist, like when those guys fired on me, I could have hellish rebuked them and just giant fireball, but I actually ended up forgetting about that as a player and just was trying to move because in my mind it's like, we need to move, this needs to continue going forward, and there's certain
I think Hellish
concepts-
Rebuke is melee only, actually.
See, that's the other thing. There's certain things that I still don't remember. I know it was an attack, but I forget. I haven't looked at it in a minute. I know Yosara has that too, so both of us will be randomly throwing that out at people.
That's the other thing I like about Fantasy Grounds is it allows you to just click right on the spell itself as it's displayed right next to your
That's very true. Let me look at
your
that.
character, or it's displayed on your character sheet, so you can just click on it and it'll tell you exactly what that spell does. So it saves a lot of time from flipping around. I really try not to look up rules in the moment. For the most part, I'll just rule, move on, and then look it up later. Just because I don't like arguing with players or even discussing for the most part with players. I'll just say, hey, read it out, tell me what you think, boom, done. And I'd say I side with the players about 70% of the time.
It's just when you're damaged by a creature within 60 feet of you. So because they cause damage with their firing,
Okay.
I could.
Hey, you were right. I really thought it was melee for some reason, but
So, but that's okay.
See, when it comes to a lot of this stuff, because I only play once a week, it doesn't come up enough for me to really remember all of it. And, that's failure of a DM, but be all right.
All good. So as we start to wrap this up, guys, you guys are more than welcome to send messages or put in comments for us to answer, for Alex to answer as a DM. If you have questions on his style or any of his recommendations on what he does as a DM. I think some of the good things we can say is that he he believes in world building, letting the story be built by the characters and the players that are in his world. And that is one of the main things that he said many times in our discussion today.
Yes, and I genuinely believe in it. World building is what a DM's job really is.
There you have it. So we'll be back next week with hopefully a full session. Yosara and Egg will hopefully return to us healthy and conditioned, and we will be still looking for a fourth member. If there's any interest or anybody you know that might be interested, please don't hesitate to DM us and send us a message. We're glad to welcome new people. But that's,
when in doubt, send me a raven.
All
Going
right,
through
guys.
Game of Thrones again. Favorite book series. All right. Hey, you guys have a good night. Thanks for hanging out and listening. And hope we didn't lose anything peeling back the curtain a little bit. Have a good night.